Hello, and welcome to another episode of Jebby XD. Today we're talking about something that's actually pretty current. I like to keep my opinions on current events to myself most of the time, unless it's something that I feel I'm actually qualified to talk about, and in this case, I feel that I am. I work as a full-time photographer and graphic designer, so the Lensa AI debacle is something that's really big and it's a big discussion in my community right now, so I just wanted to come out with my thoughts about it. Honestly, I feel like there's two problems with this whole situation. The first one being the actual app itself, and the second one being the way that artists have been arguing their side in the wrong way. And we'll talk about that in the second half of this video. But the first thing we're going to talk about is the actual problem with the Lensa AI app and what it's doing. So let's just jump right into it. I found this great article that kind of encompasses the main issue with Lensa AI all into one very consumable article. It's called "The AI Portrait App Lensa Has Gone Viral, but it might be more problematic than you think." This is an article written by Cody Mello Klein for northeastern.edu. I will link this in the description as well, so you guys can go ahead and read the whole thing, but I've made some highlights on here of the main points that I think are the most important. I'm assuming that if you're on the internet and you're watching a YouTube video, so I'm assuming that you are, you've definitely seen these AI portraits go viral. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's an app called Lensa that you basically upload 10 to 20 images on, you pay $5 to $8, and it'll generate 50 to 100 portraits of you that are based off of art across the internet. We're going to go into more detail about what this actually is, but that's the main premise of the Lensa AI trend overall. You pay a few dollars, you get a bunch of AI generated art of yourself for a very low cost. With Lensa, users upload 10 to 20 images and pay $8. The app uses a neural network known as Stable Diffusion to map a user's facial features and produce dozens of portraits in a variety of styles like fantasy, sci-fi, or anime within 20 minutes. The way AI applications like Lensa work, and this is the important part, is that developers and engineers use large data sets to train a model to recognize and learn certain characteristics or styles. Once the model learns that information, it can look at a new picture and reproduce that image in one of the styles it's been trained to reproduce. So, at the end of the day, Lensa is using Stable Diffusion and art from across the internet, which we've all been posting, incessantly for the last 10 to 15 years, and it trains a computer to look at the similarities in each type of art style and then try to replicate those things. Lensa's app has been trained on artwork creating and posted by artists across the internet, potentially appropriating their work, including their signature. I don't remember seeing any signatures on mine, but this is not something that I would be surprised by. I'm sure that there's some artists that are very well known in those categories, and thus I'm sure that this AI has generated a lot of its training specifically from certain artists and has possibly duplicated or replicated their signature. You can learn from other artists and their artwork, but should it be allowed to use every artwork out there to train AI models to imitate artists' unique styles so closely? To me, this is actually a no. If they're using a lot of references from the same artist to replicate a specific style, they're basically just ripping off that artist's style entirely. Artists in online communities like DeviantArt, which produces the kind of art that Lensa is drawing from, typically self-regulate. If someone posts art that looks too similar to another's artist, that person is usually criticized and ostracized, but it's more difficult to point a finger at an AI. But Lensa, we're back to the real problem, but Lensa raises ethical questions that go beyond the relationship between artists and AI. Many have raised privacy and data concerns as well. If the artist thing's not bothering you on its own, this part I feel like maybe should. And as someone who did this, it definitely is bothering me now. Lensa's privacy policy allows the company to use their face data to train their AI algorithm. This app's term of use also gives Lensa perpetual, irrevocable, non-exclusive, royalty-free, worldwide, fully paid, transferable, sub-licensable license to use the portraits created in the app. So what they're saying is Lensa has basically put into their terms and conditions that nobody reads that they can profit off of a portrait of your face because you agreed to it. And this problem only gets bigger as I scroll down in this article. They have your face data in perpetuity. It's one thing when you're training an algorithm to recognize a face and it's for a photo app. It's another thing when it's potentially going to be used by law enforcement to find suspects. So another concern is that these portraits and these photos that we've uploaded of ourselves saying, hey, this is who I am, can now be used against you in case, something happens and law enforcement is looking for you. But the problem gets even deeper than that, in my opinion. The images and model being used by Lensa are also stored on Amazon cloud computing services. I'm going to read that again. The images and model being used by Lensa are also stored on Amazon cloud computing services. Derek Curry, an assistant professor at Northeastern, says it's quite possible when it's uploaded to Amazon that Amazon uses that data for its own analytical purposes and it becomes part of the products that they market and sell. So if I break down what they're saying here to like the most layman degree, because that's really my understanding of it, basically what they're saying here is that the portraits created by Lensa are not only owned and profitable, but they also potentially can now be used and sold by Amazon. Imagine you're scrolling Amazon and you see an AI generated portrait of yourself on a notebook or something. That's actually really insane. Aside from just the data farming problem, there is other cultural issues that the Lensa app is also bringing to a head. Some users, which I also include myself in this one, particularly women, have also said the app produces over-sexualized images with no prompting. I can definitely relate to this because I uploaded 10 images of myself that were all just like standard selfies with clothes on, and probably 35% of the images I received back were like nude. There's literally like actual nude bodies in some of them, and to me that's a little bit strange and definitely not something that should be coming out of those apps, especially because a lot of young kids are probably using it too, underage kids, things like that. Radecki says that these representation biases are more an indictment of the art styles the AI was trained on than the technology. Women are frequently over-sexualized in fantasy art, she says. The model simply learned what it's taught. And this I kind of believe with, because again, the AI isn't making choices that are not based off the art of others. And so since we know that the AI is making choices based off the art of others, we can kind of understand that, yes, women are definitely sexualized and represented in very sexual ways in fantasy art a lot of the time. So the computer picked up on that and created art that matched that style. Still not saying that it's appropriate, again, because there's probably young underage people using this app. Professor Wang says biased data is not an excuse to reproduce bias through an app like Lensa, and I fully agree. The real problem is that engineers and designers intentionally or unintentionally don't even think about it. We need to make sure we can prepare the next generation of engineers and designers to be better prepared and to think more thoughtfully about the human value when they design this. So I think after going over this article, we can unanimously agree that there's a lot of issues with the Lensa AI portrait trend, and that the real enemy here is the company that is creating Lensa and Amazon for farming your data from these apps. That's the real enemy. We need to hold the people accountable who make the apps and make the AI and use those things. Not necessarily the people, the average people who are not actually creating the problem or creating the AI. And this very much leads into part 2 of this problem that I see existing in the community that I find myself in. The second kind of problem I've seen with people in my community with the Lensa AI trend is something that to me feels a little classist, I'm not gonna lie. I've been seeing this post go viral on Facebook pretty much the last week, and it says people will pay for an app that generates AI art, but won't pay creatives for actual art. And I totally understand the sentiment of what's being said here. I get your perspective of it. There are a lot of people in this country and in the world who can afford to pay $5 to $8 to have fun little portraits of themselves that they probably aren't going to print, they're not going to hang up in their house, things like that. Things that are not a necessity. When there's a lot of people in our country who don't have a ton of expendable money to just spend on art and commission an artist, they're probably going to be more willing to spend the $5 on an app like this. I'm not necessarily saying that, yeah, please keep doing that instead of paying artists. I feel like this argument totally dismisses the idea that some people cannot afford to pay or commission an artist $100, $200, $300, $500, or even $1,000 to get a piece of art created of themselves when it's not something that necessarily means a lot to them in the grand scheme of things. Most people really don't have the money to do that. I work as a photographer, and for a long time I was doing, senior portraits, family photos, things like that. I work in the commercial world now, but when I was working in that world, I totally saw and understood a lot of the people who could only afford to invest $100 or $200 in a shoot because that's what they could actually afford. If you want to fight the Lensa AI fight, I'm going to join you all the way. But what I'm not going to do is shame people around me. I'm not going to shame my friend who doesn't have any understanding or any knowledge of what the AI is doing and things like that. I'm not going to shame them just for doing this. I will talk to them and say, hey, just so you know, this thing, does all the things we talked about in part 1 of this video. But I'm not going to stand by and purposely make people who already struggle or maybe don't have the financial means as someone else. I'm not going to stand by and make them feel bad for spending $5 or $8 on an app. I feel like it's more important to educate them on why this is problematic and why maybe next time they should reconsider doing it, for their own sake too, as it's a huge data security problem for them. And it feels a little bit similar in the idea that people are upset with other people who might not be able to afford the best version of the thing, instead of actually being upset with the companies who are willing to rip off other artists, farm your data, and do all of those things. This is not a fight against each other. This is a fight against the industry, and it always will be. So next time when you want to just go in on your friend for spending money on an app or doing something you don't agree with, take the time to have a conversation about it instead of just shaming them, because what we've learned in our society is that shaming people turns them against you. It doesn't get them on your side. So those are my thoughts on the Lensa AI trend app. There's a lot of conversations going on about it. Again, this is kind of a short video. I don't claim to be an expert in this field. I truly don't know much about AI myself. I will say I will not be doing another AI portrait trend ever in my life, and I'm not sure you should be doing one either. So take it easy, and I'll see you on the next episode of Jebby XD.